Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. Sorry this one is a little late compared to the Hawkeye and Kate Bishop videos, but I've been a little bit busy lately. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to make it in time for the uniform sale, but in about a week or two, I'm pretty sure there's going to be an all uniform sale, so if you wanted to, based off this review, you could pick it up then. As a quick heads up, Echo's new uniform didn't really perform as well as Hawkeye's and Kate Bishop's uniform, specifically in only PvE or only PvP, but her overall performance is still pretty decent, and based off the testing that you see, you can decide whether you want to build the character as a standalone character, or if you want to specifically just use her for her leadership and support capabilities. Keep in mind that I did test Echo when she first came out, so if you want to see her performance without the uniform at level 70 then, you can just click the link or icon that is suggested at the end of the video. With that in mind, since I already had a CTP of Destruction equipped on her, all the testing that I'm doing in both PvE and PvP will be with that CTP of Destruction, regardless of whether it is the most ideal option for her. But obviously I'll also be making recommendations of what I feel would be a better option, considering that the uniform changed so much of her base kit. Anyways, if you wanted to build the character specifically for PvE, which I wouldn't necessarily recommend due to the results that I got, but if you did want to do that, I would say that a CTP of Rage might be your best option, even though she doesn't have the guaranteed crit rate, because a lot of her skills can't really be cancelled, so that means that you want to go through multiple skills while that proc to all skills is up. However, with that said, you could also use a CTP of Energy or possibly even a CTP of Destruction, though if you do go with a CTP of Destruction, you would likely have to reforge it with that strike effect, since if you just go with a regular one, she has, I believe, 33% penetration built into her kit, and the destruction only goes up to 30, so that means it'll basically just be an obelisk if you don't reforge it. You can see that the clear time isn't necessarily the best already, since I was able to clear it with about 2 minutes with Hawkeye and Kate, even though I didn't have a damage proc on them. I was able to clear Proxima stage 99 over a minute faster than Thanos, specifically because she has all defense down in her kit, and because she has a lot of paralysis that ignores immunity through her main skills in her rotation. So that would be the 4th skill and the 2nd skill, and because the 2nd skill can be cancelled, you can essentially just perma-lock down the opponent by constantly going through the 4th and 2nd skill due to their short cooldown. One thing that is considerably better with Maya's upgrade or awakening than Hawkeye's or Kate's is her HP increase. So for me, when I upgraded her with the Awakening and Transcendence, her HP increased up to 30,000, whereas for Kate and Hawkeye, that was closer to 26,000. With that said though, her damage did increase a little bit less. It was up to 10,000, whereas for those characters, it was closer to 12,000. Regardless of this though, those characters don't have a damage leadership, so if you take that into account, she gets a much larger overall increase than those other characters. Now, if you're running something like a CTP of Rage, the rotation would likely be 3 cancel 5 delay cancel after she lands, and a bit of a circular kind of AoE explosion happens, and then you do 2 cancel 4. The first skill will be filler till your other skills are back off cooldown, and then you would just repeat that rotation. If you're running a single skill damage proc like an energy or destruction, the rotation varies a little bit. You wouldn't really wait for the 5th skill explosion to happen, because it can cause you to proc on that skill instead of the 4th skill, which is what you want. So therefore the rotation would be 3 cancel 5 cancel 2 cancel 4. And the reason that you do the rotation in this order is because the 3rd skill gives you damage accumulation, the 5th skill gives you a damage buff, and the 2nd skill can be insta cancelled and layered on top of the 4th skill, which again is the one that you want to proc on. You can see that with the Awakening unlocked, I now am able to complete the same stage about 1 minute faster. And because she could complete it so quickly with the proc, I decided to take her into stage 99, and she completed pretty much the same as Hawkeye and Kate without procs for them. Though it's a little bit hard to tell with something like Thanos, that's why I did also do the Knull and Mephisto tests for comparison of raw damage. You can see a smaller difference versus Proxima, about 30 seconds, but that's because I could finish the stage so quickly, taking only about 50 seconds. I will say one thing though, that a single skill damage proc rotation, again like with an energy or destruction, doesn't work as well versus World Boss Ultimate stages, because the third skill has the all defense down that ignores immunity, and the second portion of the damage applies that defense down. So if you cancel it right away, you won't get the all defense down to apply, and if you do, it'll mess up your rotation. This is one reason why I said a CTP of Rage would likely be better, but if you don't really care about things like World Boss Ultimate, or I guess other bosses or enemies that are affected by all defense down, then that isn't really a worry. With the Awakening unlocked, the rotation that I mentioned earlier is almost exactly the same, except that you add the 6th skill before you go into the 2nd skill and then the 4th skill. So the rotation for something like an energy would be 3, cancel 6, cancel 5, cancel 2, cancel 4. The rotation would be exactly the same if you're running a Rage, except you would delay cancel 5. Keep in mind that you do want to use the 5th skill before you use your Awakening, because you want that damage buff applied to the Awakening damage. She was able to complete stage 9 of Knull even without using her lead. I was actually using Elsa's lead, but that is kind of expected with a damage proc. So obviously, because she could do that, I took her into a higher stage, that being stage 19, and again, I'm not using her leadership just to get a more even comparison with Hawkeye and Kate's performance, but I am using a support like I did with them as well, that being Taskmaster. You can see that I finished the fight with 37 seconds remaining, but with a damage proc that doesn't really seem that great. I could potentially change up the team a little bit and use her leadership as well as a support in combination with Taskmasters, and if I didn't have the damage proc, I might have been able to complete the stage, but if I used this exact same setup and I didn't have a damage proc, I don't think that she would even come close to completing this stage. So for reference, here is Kate, and I wasn't able to complete the stage, though again, as I mentioned in the previous video, with a tighter rotation and a little bit better play, I'm pretty sure that I would have been able to. However, the important thing to note here is that I was almost, or should have been able to complete the stage with no damage proc, and if I did have a damage proc, from my previous experience testing other characters, it usually is an improvement of about 1 minute 30 seconds up to 2 minutes removed from your clear time. So technically, if I did have a damage proc on Kate, I should have completed this stage with around 2 minutes remaining, give or take. Putting that into perspective, you can see just how good Hawkeye is, since I was able to complete the stage with over a minute remaining. Meaning that with a damage proc, that should be over 3 minutes, if not more. So the purpose of this comparison is again to show you that Echo's uniform PvE performance isn't really as great as these other two characters that released at the same time as her. I did also take her into stage 24 of Mephisto, this time with her leadership and 2 supports, even though the support for White Fox doesn't fully apply to her because she doesn't have that leadership tag. Despite that, she still gets benefits from the uniform passive, which gives you chain hit damage, a little bit of base damage, and about 30% ignore dodge. So because of that, and because she has a type advantage versus Mephisto, she did perform better at stage 24 versus him than stage 19 versus Knull. As the previous videos showed, Kate wasn't really able to complete this stage with no damage proc, leaving about 10 health bars left when time ended. And then Hawkeye, without a damage proc, was able to complete the Mephisto stage, but this time not ahead of Echo because she got that extra support. To further show you her PvE performance, with that CTP of Destruction, which is reforged I might add, but it doesn't have that strike option, it's just additional attack. So in essence, it's basically like a regular CTP of Destruction. But with that, she was only able to score in the 7 million range, even though she did have dual support. For reference, both Kate and Hawkeye were able to score in the 8 million range or even past it without a damage proc and just having a single support and Nick Fury's leadership. Now, because Echo's performance is kind of average for PvE, that leaves the question of whether you would want to build her for PvP or if she is even capable of standing alone in that mode. And the answer is yes, but you likely won't really use her for things like timeline. Her kit is actually surprisingly good in PvP, even though it is deceptively simple. The most obvious thing is that her leadership is amazing because it gives you that damage and defense increase as well as the debuff to speed types. Not to mention that she also has those support capabilities if you don't use her in the leadership position, which lowers chain hit damage and also increases damage in a way by ignoring the opponent's dodge. Despite these obvious facts, you might think that she doesn't really have much going for her for PvP, since she doesn't have things like reflect or iframe ignore or even a counter. Her passive now gives her 33% penetration to all sources, which means that you don't need something like a CTU destruction, since that penetration portion is built into all of your skills. In addition to that, she has a lot of buffs on her skill, including a damage buff on the 5th skill, a single skill damage buff on the 4th skill, and damage accumulation on the 3rd skill. To add to that, she has a lot of debuff effects on those skills, including a lot of paralysis that ignores immunity, not to mention the fact that her survival is surprisingly good because of her guaranteed dodge rate, and if you're lucky enough to have the artifact, it makes her dodge even more skills because of that kind of extra guaranteed dodge. On top of that, because of her short cooldowns, she can stack these effects fairly quickly, and because these skills are usually iframes or partial iframes, she can avoid a lot of damage. Not to mention the fact that her 4th skill and her 3rd skill both have a healing on it, so as she constantly rotates through these skills, she's also healing a lot. This, combined with her stat bump increase, gives her a lot of survival and means that you can potentially run the character with a damage proc if you wanted to. As you can see, with the CTP of Destruction that I'm running, I'm able to take out all of these high level metas, even ones with additional lives, and even characters like Spider-Man I'm able to survive long enough to go into her awakening skill, which has that iframe ignore, allowing me to hit him and win the fight that way. But the benefits to her kit don't stop there. The AI actually focuses most of her best skills and in a pretty good rotation. It'll usually open up either with the 2nd skill or the 4th skill, generally the 4th skill first, which provides her a damage increase to that single skill, and with a damage proc can pretty much one-shot any character. From there, it usually goes to the 3rd skill, which heals her and gives her that damage accumulation, and then follows up with the 5th skill, which gives her that damage buff and hits pretty hard as well. If the AI doesn't open with the 4th skill, it'll open with the 2nd skill, and that skill actually hits really hard too, and is a very long iframe. One aspect of a character's kit that is frequently overlooked is the character's skill priority relative to the opponent. And for Echo, I have to say it is up there with some of the best, like Molecule Man, meaning that she will frequently go into her skills very quickly, and even if they do get cancelled, you'll get the benefits of the buffs from them, including the heal. So for example, for these timeline tests, if I just use her with her leadership and all the other skills are still on cooldown, her skill priority on the 2nd skill is so high that she'll go into that skill very quickly, often before the opponent has a chance to do anything. Funny enough, you can see that in this clip that I'm repeating, she's fast enough to go into her 4th skill before Warlock is even able to finish fully casting his 2nd skill. If you want my suggestions for which CTPs would work best on her, the one that I am going to go with after swapping out my Destruction, now that the discount is in effect, would be a CTP of Greed. I think this CTP synergizes very well with her because she already has pretty good survival, meaning that you can make use of that ambush effect and get even more damage versus opponents with high mitigation. To add to that, because her skills are fairly quick, you can get good use from that proc on multiple of the skills instead of just one, and because she has built-in penetration, you don't really have to worry about that. On top of that, if you're going to be running 3 speed types in Alliance Conquest, the opponent will likely be countering with combat types, and possibly ones that have reflect damage back to you, and that ambush proc will make you immune to the reflect and make you deal more damage to combat types and lower their type advantage versus you. If you prefer the character to be a bit more tanky, a CTP of regen would likely be very good on her because she has good base health and she has multiple heals across multiple skills. So you're for sure going to get an activation from one of them, but getting an activation from both of them should help a lot with that recovery on the CTP of regen. Alternatively, you could also go with a CTP of authority if you don't have a lot of base health on your cards. So somewhere around the 50 to 60 range, I would say would be kind of the cutoff there. This isn't to say that a CTP of authority is worse, because she also has that damage mitigation in her kit, so it would combo well with the steal effect, but it usually comes down to preference. Final thing to keep in mind is that all the testing that I did was without the artifact, so with it you should be able to do a little bit better in PvP. From these results you can see that the character can stand alone in PvP, though like I mentioned, you'll likely not use her in timeline and more so in Alliance Conquest. Even there, it's up to you whether you want to build her to be a standalone character, which she can function pretty well in, or you can build her purely as a support. On the PvE side, I don't really see many people wanting to build her as a standalone character, so you'll likely get the most benefit from using her as a leadership and support character, meaning that you'll likely want to have a CTP of Insight to boost that effect even further for your main damage dealing characters. Also, one last thing, because the CTP Unbind event is in effect, some of you might be wondering what kind of changes you might want to make. Maybe you have some specific ones in mind and you want additional help, then you can just go to my Discord, go and register there. You can find the link in the video description below, and I can do my best to help you out, but there's also some really smart people in the Discord that can help you out as well. That does it for this video. I'm actually kind of excited to share some of the results that I had testing these characters in Alliance Conquest, and that video will likely be coming out with an update to the Alliance Conquest tier list. I'm also kind of curious to see what kind of mid-month we will get from here. I'm kind of hearing rumors or sort of data mines on a potential Gwenpool upgrade, but we have also heard that there was a potential Rocket Raccoon data mine, so it's not really sure whether we'll get that with the mid-month or later on. Anyways, that wraps up this one. Thank you for your time in watching. Please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing if you did enjoy the video, but the video is now over.